Domba Tijan la Kisham Sara, Nijan River Sering, Jankan Sanjabur Tikishan, La Yalarman, Jimmy Panzoja, Soran, going to Tobam, Shinji, Love.
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it, here to receive and uphold it, vow to fathom the true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us begin our class on the Surangama Sutra. There will be no class tomorrow, and our next week's schedule will be the same as the previous class, the previous week. We should have class if there are any exceptions. There will be further announcements. The classes are still on the wish-fulfilling treasury and the Surangama Sutra. Currently, in the Surangama Sutra, we have already studied that Venerable Purna posed a few questions, about 5 to 6 questions, to the world-honored one. And then the Buddha will reply those questions to Venerable Purna. He said, well, listen carefully, listen attentively. I will now expound these teachings to you. Venerable Purna listened reveredly and silently. Now the Buddha continue to reply the questions that's posed by Venerable Purna. That's what we're going to cover today. The content today, I think, would be a little bit difficult to understand, but it's so crucial since we know that Surangama Sutra is a Sutrayana teaching. It is a sutra, but the teachings that's included are the profound teachings of Vajrayana or of Dzogchen. Part of it is from Dzogchen. When omniscient Mipa Rinpoche and Longchenpa describes or explains the teachings of the 17 great tantras, they would often talk about the ground and the ground of manifestation. At the time when there's the manifestation of the ground, if one can recognize one's own true nature is just like Samadhabhadra, then one would be able to attain enlightenment right at the ground. If one cannot recognize it, but from the basic ground there manifested confusion, then that is called the co-emergent ignorance. At the time of not recognizing one's true nature, yet to grasp onto the external phenomenon is called imputational ignorance, and one would continuously to stray into samsara. At that time, not recognizing one's own mind is called the single-natured ignorance. In the Tantra, there are the descriptions of the 3 different types of ignorance which led sentient beings to continuously stray and continuously drift in samsara. When we talk about the ground and the ground manifestation, the samsara and nirvana and the differences in between, there are lots of theories being described in the Tantra, as well as direct pointing out. So for those of you who study those, then you would definitely develop a great faith in Surangama Sutra, and you can further develop your understanding and further delve into the teachings in Surangama Sutra through the writings over here. Previously, Purna asked the question that if the 4 great elements all partakes of the nature of the Tathagata Garbha and they are all pure, then what produces the rivers and mountains and grounds and all the pure and impure phenomena? The Buddha then replies in such a way. The Buddha said, Purna, you have asked why in fundamental purity the mountains and rivers and the great earth suddenly arise. If you were to say that, you asked the question that if everything are all pure, then why there's the sudden arise of the mountains, rivers, and great earth, and all the sentient or the animate world, all kinds of manifestations? And then the Buddha continued to say that, have you often heard that thus come one expound upon the wonderful light of the enlightened nature and the bright wonder of the fundamental enlightenment? Now, these two terms that's used over here, the wonderful light of enlightenment and bright wonder of the fundamental enlightenment, are the ones that the Buddha usually would expound and teach about in the sutras that explains the ultimate truth. The wonderful light of enlightenment refers to the nature, the bright nature, and then the bright wonder of the fundamental enlightenment is to realize that bright nature. The wonderful light and bright wonder, according to the Chinese translation, since there are two different words, two different terms, but the meaning there, in terms of the meaning, they both mean luminosity or light, and in the Tibetan translation, it's both luminosity over here. The Buddha over here tells Venerable Purna, saying that, well, you've often heard about the teachings from the Buddha, giving the teachings of the wonderful light of enlightenment and bright wonder of the fundamental enlightenment. The Buddha did not explain what they are, but he asked the question to Venerable Purna, saying that, haven't you heard about it often? Then Venerable Purna replied by saying that, yes, world-honored one, I have often heard the Buddha expound upon the subject. Venerable Purna said that, yes, I have often heard the Buddha expound on the wonderful light of enlightenment and bright wonder of the fundamental enlightenment. According to the commentary, such as the commentary of fingers and palms, it says that though Venerable Purna often heard about it, but Venerable Purna had only heard the words but not realized the genuine meaning behind it. Just like how some of our practitioners over here, after coming here and stayed here for 10, 20, or 30 years, though often hearing the terms such as primordial purity, spontaneous luminosity, but it's difficult to say whether they had really genuinely had that experience. And it's very difficult to say whether they will have the opportunity to attain enlightenment in this lifetime. Venerable Purna, from one aspect, he said that, yes, I have heard the world-honored one expounding on it often. I have heard the terms such as the wonderful light of enlightenment and bright wonder of the fundamental enlightenment. He said, yes, I had definitely heard of that. I had heard of the terms such as wonderful light of enlightenment, bright wonder of the fundamental enlightenment. Just like us, we had heard of the terms such as the bright nature, the bright awareness, the naked awareness, or from the Surangama point of view, the true nature of Tathagata that is non-dual from the non-dual of manifesting emptiness. And we have heard the term such as the nature that is clarity, and we had heard of the clearly realize one's mind and sees the true nature. Such kind of beautiful terms, we have heard about that. But how many of us had truly realized it in the experience? How many of you had truly eradicated your afflictions? This is something that we all long for. This is the kind of level of realization that we long for and we dream about. But at the time of waking up, knowing that we had not come to such a realization, we would feel rather quite saddened. Similarly, Venerable Purna also heard of such terms. And then the Buddha continued to ask, you speak of the light of enlightenment. Is it that the natural light is called enlightenment? Or are you saying the enlightenment is initially without light and that then there is so-called brightening of the enlightenment? There's so many terms that sounds like a riddle. The light of enlightenment, that is the natural light that is called enlightenment. Or are you saying the enlightenment is initially without light and that there is so-called brightening of the enlightenment? I think for people who had never studied Buddhism, even if after reading it for one's whole life, it's hard to understand it. Even if you were to offer them a grand reward, they probably won't be able to understand the light of enlightenment, the natural light that is called enlightenment. What is the meaning? The Buddha told Venerable Purna, as he stated yesterday, that the mind is luminous awareness, and this is the kind of natural awareness that's been expounded. Such kind of awareness is all-pervasive, and this awareness is pure and primordial. After stating all such, this kind of luminous awareness, is it existent or not existent? The Buddha will start to give the direct pointing out through asking questions to Venerable Purna. He said that this light of enlightenment, is it that the natural light is called the enlightenment? Is it unconditioned? Is it that your mind the mind always has such nature of luminosity, therefore it is called awareness? Or is it that you're saying that enlightenment is initially without light, and then later with your practice and with your exertion, with your study, and then there is the so-called brightening of the enlightenment. So at the beginning, it was not bright, it was not luminous, and then later, through your practice, it becomes luminous and becomes bright. When you say this luminous awareness, when you speak of this light of enlightenment, what is it that you are speaking of? The Buddha started to corner Venerable Purna to further question him about this bright light of enlightenment. Whenever we talk about bright, whenever we talk about dark, in fact, the majority of time and the majority of people would speak of it from the conceptual point of view. And it is not the ultimate understanding of such kind of brightness. Especially when it comes to the Shravaka practitioners, most of them would still grasp onto the literal meaning or grasp onto the conception and the characteristics. Then Venerable Purna said that if the absence of light is called enlightenment, then there is no light whatever. If this enlightenment were not bright at the beginning, if it were not light, if there was the absence of light to begin with, then there is no light whatsoever. If you were to say that it started off from being bright, then it will continue to be bright all the way till the end. What's the point of practice? So in his opinion, that at first it was definitely not bright, and there's the absence of light to enlightenment, and the sentient beings were very confused, and through their practice and through through the direct pointing out, they would be able to attain the bright enlightenment that is appropriate. Otherwise, if there were light to begin with, the sentient beings no longer need to go through the studies. So there are two questions. Was this enlightenment bright from the start, or did it gain light after practice? As you know, for the Shravakas, after understanding the nature of ignorance, and then through their study and through the truth of path, after they've extinguished affliction, which lead to the realization of the truth of enlightenment, or truth of cessation, rather, that is what the Shravakas would consider as light, as luminous. So the Buddha told Venerable Purna, saying that if you were to say that there was no light at the beginning, then there is no light that is called enlightenment. If there is no bright enlightenment without light added to it, then there is no enlightenment with it. Because if you were to say that if there is no bright in the enlightenment, then even after, it doesn't matter how much you practice, there would be no light, no bright enlightenment at all. There would be no light to it. It's just like asking a person to wash a piece of black coal and wishing it to become white. There's no possibility for a piece of black coal to become white, so it is not possible. If you were to say that there is no bright enlightenment, just as what you stated before, at the beginning, if you were to say that beginning there is enlightenment, and then later there is the brightness after practice, in this way you're saying that the nature of it is not enlightenment. Because if you were to say that there is the light and there is the thing that to be lightened, then the nature is no longer enlightenment. It is without enlightenment. If it is without to be lightened, without the thing that is to be lightened, then the nature is not brightened anymore. The enlightenment doesn't uphold the nature of brightness anymore. It is just like a light bulb that we have. The light comes in after. It is manufactured afterwards, and the nature of the light bulb is not bright. But there are the things that oppose the nature to illuminate, such as the wish-fulfilling jewels, such as the sun and moon. Light just naturally comes within this, and that's the nature of them. If you were to think that at the beginning of it, the enlightenment is not bright, it becomes bright later, then the nature of it is without enlightenment, without bright, which is not reasonable, because without brightness, without being aware, and without clear realization, without a sense of clarity, that is not possible. How could realization, how could enlightenment be without clarity and brightness? This is the Buddha's refutation of Purna's proposition that enlightenment is initially without brightness, but later brightness was manifested because of practice. Many people probably feel the same way as Purna, because we probably feel that at the beginning we are ignorant, without brightness, and then later through practice and through Dharma, then we can attain enlightenment. It is just like turning on the light, switch on the light, and then you can see the nature. But this is really something that you can speak of it in front of our conceptual mind. This is something that you can converse only on the conceptual level. You can speak of it on a conventional level, but in actuality, our nature is luminosity. We're simply re-recognizing it. We're simply re-understanding it and re-seeing it. Other than that, there is no such thing as bright or not bright. Otherwise, if you were to say that, oh, it was not bright at the beginning and later becomes bright, and then this nature of mind becomes conditioned, and conditioned is not permanent. But the true Buddha nature and true Tathagata is permanent, it is ethereal, it is not changing. So you can see that there are lots of conflicts if you were to agree with Venerable Purna. Especially if you have already developed some kind of experience or insight of the nature of mind, though you may not be able to express it, but you would definitely be able to understand it. And then the Buddha continued to say that the nature of enlightenment is essentially bright. It is false for you to make it bright enlightenment. Over here it says that your nature, your enlightenment must be luminous, and all of the nature of the sentient beings, the Tathagata is luminous. It is without manufacture, it is without any diligent exertion, it is not through any practice. If you were to think that it needs to be practiced upon, and then there's the light on top of it, that is not the true luminous, that is not the true brightness. According to some great masters of the Chinese Buddhism tradition, the later part can be explained through the three joys and or the three different characteristics. Some also stated the 5 different kinds of characteristics, the coarse characteristics, that is. Those kinds of explanations could also work, and later we can look at it as well. Especially according to Master O.E., they have a particular way of explaining it. For example, the 3 joys and the 3 characters. At first, it talks about the character of the karma. Over here, it says that enlightenment is not something that needs to be made bright, for once that is done, an object is established because of the light. This enlightenment is already bright. It is not obtained through the later practice. If it were to be, then it is false. Because in that way, you're simply saying that an object is established because of the light. So this is the first one, which is called the character of karma, since the connection between the brightness and enlightenment becomes the illumination and the one to be illuminated. And then the second one is the character of change. So over here, the Buddha says that once an object is falsely set up, you as a false subject come into being. If your enlightenment is something to be illuminated or is established because of light, then this light becomes false. So you as a false subject comes into being. Your subject, so who you are, wisdom or whatever it is, becomes this false manifestation. Then the second one, the one on the change, is also called the subtle character. The third one is manifestation, the character of manifestation. It is almost equivalent to when we say that there's the ground and then there's the manifestation out of the ground. All kinds of manifestations, all kinds of phenomena. Initially, it is of one entity, but how could there be all kinds of variations in its manifestation? Therefore, over here, the particular term is called the character of manifestation. So over here, we're going to look at how Sutrayana talks about this type of manifestation. Over here, it says that in the midst of what is neither the same nor different blazes forth. In Vajrayana, it talks about when the Buddha and the sentient beings are not separated yet, that is at this particular state that is rather neutral. It is without any way of expressing it. It is a ground. It is simply at the time when at the time of inseparability of emptiness and luminosity, there is no difference between emptiness and luminosity. And then through this nature, in the midst of what is neither the same nor different, and then differences blazes forth. In the Tibetan translation, it's translated as all of a sudden it blazes forth, just as in the beginning of the bright kalpa, when we studied the treasure of the wish-fulfilling treasury, at the beginning, how there is the manifestation out of its basic ground, and how there is inseparability of the sentient or the animated and the animated world. The description is the same. And then all of a sudden, within that basic ground that is neither the same nor different, everything started to manifest, all kinds of manifestations and phenomena. And what is different from that difference becomes sameness because of the difference. Let it be the animated or the inanimate world, there are all kinds of manifestations. Of course, we can see in the inanimate world there are such modification of various things, and in our animate world, there is such a great diversity as well. For example, just look at a group of siblings, some numbers of brothers. For example, at first there are 2 or 3 of them, and then there's the continuous evolving of such relations or such numbers of people, though they are different, though those people are different, but they would also become the same. In terms of difference, it talks about the world or the different aspects of the phenomena, but in terms of sameness, it talks about, for example, the space and the stars. Those would be the same. What's the difference between same and difference then? Once sameness and differences are created, then due to them, what is neither the same nor different is further established. At the time of no same and no difference, not the same refers to the sentient beings, because there's nothing the same and no difference. What is no difference, including the dispositions and the leanings of each sentient being, though very different. But there is something that is the same about them or not different about them. What is that? That is the Tathagata, that is the Buddha nature, that is the nature which is clarity and luminosity. That is the same. Once sameness and difference are created, then due to them, what is neither the same nor different is further established. Now it may seem to be very complex and it may feel quite difficult to understand, but when you really think about it, we would be able to know that this is the beginning, this is the source of all the manifestations. Because of different causes and conditions, and the variety of causes and conditions, therefore the variety of manifestations. But out of all the variety of manifestations, there is something that we commonly share. Look at us as human beings, though that many things may be different. We have different personalities, different hobbies, different interests, and different clothing, but all of those are not the same. But when we talk about something the same, our Buddha nature is the same, our nature is the same, our brightness is the same, and the emptiness is the same. All of those are the same. And then the Buddha continued to say that this turmoil eventually brings about weariness. A prolonged weariness produces defilement. So according to the Zen Buddhism, usually it talks about the 3 types of manifestations, the subtle and the coarse, and then the subtle ones. And then there are the 6 coarse ones, which are also the characteristics. Some said the 6, and some, according to some commentaries, it says it's the 5. But over here, I think the content is rather quite clear. And if I don't give you the explanation in detail, I think it's difficult for you to understand, especially when it adapts into the field of Vajrayana. It would be best for me to combine the Vajrayana teaching with the sutra so that it's easier to understand the sutra, especially for those of you who studied the sutra. Then it would be easier for you to understand Surangama Sutra. And at least if you have never studied Vajrayana, some of the teachings may be a bit confusing, but you should be able to find the very basic teachings on luminosity and emptiness that you could find in the Vajrayana. I noticed that the great masters of the past, when they explain or make commentaries of Surangama Sutra, their explanations are so profound and very thorough, except the language is a bit difficult to understand. Some parts of the commentary may not completely match with the actual sutra, and sometimes it is because the teacher was presenting the teaching in the oral presentation, but was later transcribed. So when it comes to such kind of teaching and then transcribed teaching, it happens sometimes. But if it were to be a thorough written commentary, then it has to be more strict. Anyhow, over here, it continued to talk about the 5 coarse characters of the phenomena. What are those then? Over here, it says that the turmoil eventually brings about weariness, and then prolonged weariness produces defilement. As we have already talked about, the sameness and difference all appears from the nature. Similarly, for those of you who studied the Tao Te Ching, probably studied that from the Tao there gives rise to 1, and 1 gives rise to 2, and 2 gives rise to 3, and 3 gives rise to all phenomena. So the source of everything, according to Tao Te Ching, is the Tao. And then what is Tao? If we were to explain it from the Vajrayana's point of view, then this Tao is the basic ground. And then this world that is neither the same nor different. Some of the great masters of the past talked about the Tao or the ground, or within that field of without the same nor difference, all kinds of different dharmas would blaze forth, would manifest. And then in this kind of basic ground, the turmoil eventually brings about weariness, and prolonged weariness produces defilements. Out of the 5 characteristics, it is called the characteristic of wisdom, because wisdom is of constant, and all kinds of phenomena, since it continuously to manifest. Therefore, the dualistic thoughts would continuously to manifest because of the object, and one would create lots of awareness to stray in samsara. This is the first one. The second one is the characteristic of continuity, which is the prolonged awareness. And then the third one is defilement, which is grasping. So how about weariness, prolonged weariness? It means that within this samsara, one gets extremely tired. Such kind of tiresomeness from straying in samsara produces happiness and suffering, and such kinds of happiness and suffering would continuously to manifest. This kinds of profound, prolonged awareness. I see that in many of you, people who are staffing, who are volunteering to serve the Sangha. I see many of you get lots of awareness. Those of you who attend exams and get so worried about not getting a good grade. Even if you get 0, it's still fine. The other day, I encountered a teacher. The teacher, my middle school teacher, he didn't really teach us very wholeheartedly. So the whole class decided to go on a strike, and we all made vows not to attend the exam well. So everyone got a 0 in his class. And then one of our classmates got a 3 instead of a 0. So the whole class started to give him a public criticism, which is very much of a cultural revolution product, or byproduct of that. A few days ago, I met that teacher, and we both remember that history. It was not a very good past that we shared, but we both pretend to have forgotten it. At that time, remember one of our classmates got 3 instead of a 0. He later became a Khenpo as well, and I think next time when I meet him, I will ask whether he remembers it or not. I remember that we publicly criticized him, and the whole class started to scold him, except him, because he got 3 and the rest of the class got 0. So the rest of the class were considered as heroes. When it comes to exams, I also had such kind of infamous history. I hope that you wouldn't go on strike during exams and to tell the Dharma teacher that this is my lineage. I remember that later that teacher started to cry, saying that I worked so hard to teach this class, but this class, nobody likes me in this class. And then he asked to transfer to teach other classes. Anyhow, the other day I met my teacher. I just remember that story. Over here, this is the prolonged weariness. The next one is defilement. The defilement is the characteristic of grasping. It is because of the various kinds of things, the various kinds of defilements, the form, sound, smell, and touch, and all of those 6 defilements, one started to produce dualistic thoughts. And then the next one is the combination of these in a murky turbidity is called the characteristic of name. This is similar to what is expounded in the valid cognition, where it talks about mixing the self-character to the general character and make dualistic thoughts and grasp with dualistic thoughts. Therefore, over here it says that the combination of these in a murky turbidity creates affliction with respect to wearisome defilements. So that is the 5th one. Upon grasping on all of those, one would have all kinds of afflictions afflictions, create all kinds of karma, and have all kinds of weariness, which then would manifest into the suffering and afflictions within samsara. There are the 6 characteristics. The first one is of knowledge, and second one of continuity, and then the third one of grasping, then the next one of name or reckoning name, and then the arisal of karma, that's the 5th one, and there's the 6th one, which is suffering bound to karma. And let's look at the next part where the Buddha says that arisal is the world, stillness is emptiness, emptiness is sameness, the world is difference. What is neither sameness nor difference is actual conditioned dharma. So over here it talks about because of all the previously stated, now there is the arisal of the world, which is all kinds of phenomena. And in this world there is the animate and then inanimate world. If it is still, then it becomes space, it becomes emptiness. And then stillness is emptiness, emptiness is sameness. The space that is described over here is taken as one manifestation as well. So the space is the same, let it be of any directions, let it be of the space over any continents. The space between our mouth or in others' mouth, the space is the same. But the world is different. When you look at the animate world, when you look at different people, though roughly people would look similar, but when you look further, when you look more carefully, people would look very different. Maybe the different eyes, different nose. So there's difference. And then what is neither sameness nor difference is the actual conditioned dharma. The sameness and difference are of 2 different states. The nature is the same. From the Madhyamika's point of view, the nature is parted from the 4 extremes and 8 kinds of elaborations. That is called the actual conditioned dharma. Such kind of actual conditioned dharmas is the nature of the unconditioned dharmas. The commentaries sometimes would quote from the Mahayana Shastra on developing faith, especially when it comes to the 6 different characteristics. Over here it talks about how if we were to generate some characteristics, there would be all kinds of dharmas. Without characteristics, without the dharmas. Master Mazu once said that if there's the arisal of mind, there's the arisal of all kinds of phenomena. If there is no mind, then there is no dharma or no place for the dharma to arise from. As long as there's the manifestation of dharmas, then there will be all kinds of phenomena, all kinds of manifestation. But such kinds of manifestation is both the same and difference with the space, and the nature is of no difference from the luminous emptiness. From this aspect, we should be able to understand that all phenomena are simply within the basic nature of Tathagata-garbha, and it is neither parted nor gathered together. From this aspect, we should be able to understand. But at that time, Venerable Purna probably quite confused. By now, he probably forgot about the question that he asked. So I wish that you could further look into the answers and the meaning of the Buddha's response.
Chubun chune zo